You finally reach six figures, and somehow, you still don't feel safe. Think about that for a second. Because there's a version of yourself from 5 years ago who would have laughed at the idea of making $100,000 a year and still losing sleep over money. That version of you thought six figures was the finish line. The number where stress finally stops, where the checking account always has a cushion, where groceries don't feel like a math problem. But here's the thing. A lot of people cross that line and feel almost exactly the same as before. Maybe slightly better, but not safe. Not really. There's still that low hum of financial anxiety running in the background. The kind that shows up when the car makes a weird noise, or when open enrollment comes around and the health insurance options all seem terrible in different directions. The kind that makes a $1,200 dental bill feel like a personal attack on your entire financial plan. And if that sounds familiar, this video is for you. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the US experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because what we're going to talk about today isn't budgeting tips or index fund strategies. It's something harder and more important than that. It's why the feeling of financial safety is so much harder to reach than the number suggests. And once you understand the mechanics behind that feeling, something actually starts to shift. So, let's start with the math, because the math is genuinely interesting before we even get to the psychology. $100,000 a year sounds like a lot. And in some parts of the country, it is a lot. But let's talk about what $100,000 actually looks like in a fairly typical American life. After federal taxes, the effective rate for a single filer at that income level sits around 17 to 18%. Then you've got state income tax. Depending on where you live, that could be zero if you're in Texas or Florida, or it could be another 5 to 9% if you're in California, New York, or Oregon. Then FICA, Social Security, and Medicare. That's another 7.65% on the employee side. So before you make a single spending decision, you're looking at roughly $67,000 to $72,000 in take-home pay in a moderate tax state. Call it about $5,800 to $6,000 a month. Now here's what that actually looks like. The median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the United States crossed $1,500 per month back in 2022 and has largely stayed elevated since. In cities like Austin, Denver, Seattle, Miami, or basically any metro area with a job market that would have attracted someone earning $100,000, you're looking at $1,800 to $2,400 for something that doesn't embarrass you. Let's say $2,000 to keep the math clean. That's already 33% of your take-home pay. Housing experts and federal guidelines say 30% is the upper limit of affordability. So right out of the gate, housing alone is pushing the boundary. Add a car, not a luxury car. A used car with a reasonable payment, maybe $400 a month. Insurance on top of that, $150 to $200 in most states. More if you live somewhere with heavy traffic or harsh weather. Now you're at $600 in transportation. Groceries for one person, eating reasonably, not meal prepping like an athlete, not eating out constantly. Runs about $400 to $500 a month according to USDA food cost data. Health insurance, if you're getting it through an employer and contributing to a decent plan, might cost you $200 to $400 a month out of pocket after the employer contribution. And that's before any actual healthcare happens. Before copays, prescriptions, or the $300 urgent care visit you told yourself you'd avoid but didn't. Utilities, internet, phone. Another $250 to $350 combined, depending on where you live and what subscriptions have quietly accumulated in the background. So far, $2,000 rent, $600 transportation, $450 groceries, $300 health insurance, $300 utilities and phone. That's $3,650 a month in baseline costs. On $5,900 take home. That leaves roughly $2,250 for everything else. Student loans, retirement contributions, any savings goals, entertainment, clothing, travel, unexpected expenses, gifts, the occasional dinner out that costs more than expected, and the general cost of being a human being who exists in society. Now here's what most people don't realize. That $2,250 left over feels like freedom on paper. But in practice, It evaporates in ways that are hard to track, hard to anticipate, and almost impossible to fully prevent. A 2023 report from the Federal Reserve found that 37% of Americans would struggle to cover an unexpected $400 expense. But here's the part that rarely gets discussed. That statistic includes people earning well above the median income. Because income and financial resilience are not the same thing. They're related, but they are not the same thing. This is where it gets interesting. Because the question isn't really, where does the money go? The question is, why doesn't having more money create more security? And the answer to that has less to do with spreadsheets than it does with how the human brain processes financial information. There's a concept in behavioral economics called the hedonic treadmill. The basic idea is that humans have a remarkable ability to adapt to new circumstances, positive or negative, and return to a relatively stable baseline of emotional well-being. When something good happens, we feel better. For a while, then we recalibrate. The new level becomes the new normal, and we start looking for the next thing that will make us feel better. This applies directly to income. When someone goes from $55,000 to $75,000, there's a genuine and real sense of relief. Maybe some breathing room. But within 6 to 12 months, spending patterns adjust. The apartment gets a little nicer. The car gets upgraded. Restaurant habits shift. Clothing choices change, subtly, usually, but they change. And the $75,000 starts to feel like what the $55,000 used to feel like. Which is why the jump from $75,000 to $100,000 often produces a smaller emotional return than expected. The threshold keeps moving. Not because people are reckless or irresponsible, but because adaptation is a fundamental feature of human psychology. The American Psychological Association has tracked financial stress as one of the top sources of anxiety in the United States consistently for over 15 years. And one of the more sobering findings in that data is that the stress doesn't disappear at higher income levels. It often shifts form. At lower incomes, this was studied extensively by economist Richard Easterlin, who noticed that as countries got wealthier, reported happiness didn't consistently increase, in part because people were always comparing themselves to the people around them, not to their past selves. That dynamic plays out on a personal level constantly. Someone earning $100,000 in a city where most of their peer group earns $130,000 to $150,000 will often feel behind. Someone earning $65,000 in a community where that's solidly middle class will often feel comfortable. The number is almost less important than the comparison point. And in 2024 and 2025, comparison has a new and particularly cruel delivery mechanism: social media, where the reference group is no longer the neighborhood or the workplace. It's an algorithmically curated feed of people who are doing better, traveling more, buying things, celebrating promotions, showing off kitchens, going on trips. The baseline keeps getting pulled upward in ways that have nothing to do with actual economic reality. The Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances consistently shows that Americans dramatically overestimate how much wealth their peers have, which means people are feeling inadequate relative to a benchmark that doesn't actually exist. That's a brutal cognitive trap, and most people are in it without realizing it. Let's talk about something specific that doesn't get enough attention in finance content: the psychological weight of financial fragility, even when the numbers technically look okay. There's a term in psychology, precarity anxiety, which describes the chronic low-grade stress that comes from feeling like the ground beneath you could shift at any moment. And in the United States, the structure of financial life creates precarity anxiety almost by design, even for people who are doing reasonably well. Here's why. In most developed countries, there are stronger social safety nets, universal health care, stronger unemployment protections, subsidized childcare, lower education costs. These systems act as a financial floor. Even if something goes wrong, there's a structure beneath you. In the US, that floor is much thinner and much more conditional. Lose your job, and your health insurance is often gone within the month unless you pay for COBRA at full cost, which can run $600 to $700 per month just to maintain individual coverage. Get hit with a medical emergency, and a $30,000 bill is not an extreme scenario. Have a kid and childcare in most American cities costs more than in-state college tuition. These aren't edge cases. These are standard financial realities for working Americans, and they create a persistent, rational sense that the margin for error is very small, even when the income looks fine on paper. A study published by the Urban Institute found that nearly half of American adults reported experiencing significant financial hardship in a given year, not just low-income adults. That data point matters because it tells us something important. Financial vulnerability in this country isn't a condition that higher income fully resolves. It reduces it. But the structural exposure to major financial shocks, medical, employment, housing, doesn't disappear just because someone cleared six figures. Now here's what I think is the most important psychological concept in this entire conversation, and it's one that almost no mainstream financial content talks about: the difference between objective security and felt security. Objective security is measurable. It's the number in the savings account, the ratio of debt to income, the months of emergency fund, the retirement contribution rate. These are real and they matter. But felt security, the actual experience of feeling safe, is a different thing. And felt security is shaped less by the numbers than by how someone interprets and relates to their own financial situation. Two people with identical balance sheets can have radically different experiences of financial safety depending on their beliefs, their history with money, and their mental models about what enough actually looks like. There's fascinating research in behavioral economics about what's called loss aversion. The finding, reliably reproduced across dozens of studies, that losing something feels about twice as bad as gaining the equivalent amount feels good. What that means practically is that financial anxiety is not symmetrical. The fear of losing what someone has worked to build, the apartment, the stability, the lifestyle that took years to construct, registers more powerfully than the pleasure of having built it in the first place. That asymmetry keeps people in a low-level state of defensive vigilance even when, by most objective measures, things are going reasonably well. And it gets more specific than that. Research by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman and others found that income has a meaningful effect on emotional well-being up to a certain point. Original research suggested around $75,000, though more recent studies with larger datasets have put it higher, in the $100,000 to $120,000 range depending on cost of living. But here's the nuance that often gets missed. Beyond that threshold, additional income becomes much less predictive of daily emotional well-being. What matters more at that point is how someone relates to money, whether they feel in control, whether they have a clear sense of their financial trajectory, whether they feel like the system is working for or against them. Which brings up the identity piece, because money doesn't just affect how people feel, it affects who they think they are. And the US cultural narrative around money is particularly loaded. There's a deeply embedded belief in American culture that financial success is a reflection of personal worth. That if you're doing well financially, it's because you're disciplined, smart, and hardworking. And if you're struggling, it must be because something is wrong with your choices or your character. This narrative is everywhere, in media, in motivational content, in the way families talk about money, in the way people talk about themselves. The problem with that narrative is that it makes financial anxiety personal in a way that amplifies suffering and distorts behavior. If someone believes that their account balance is a referendum on their value as a person, then financial stress doesn't just feel dangerous, it feels shameful. And shame drives some of the worst financial decisions people make. Avoiding looking at their bank account, hiding debt from partners, spending impulsively to generate a feeling of control, or refusing to ask for help because the admission of struggle feels too costly to their self-image. The research on financial shame is unambiguous. A 2022 survey by Bankrate found that 58% of Americans with credit card debt felt shame or embarrassment about it, not regret. Shame. That's a fundamentally different emotion, and it leads to fundamentally different behavior. Regret is information. Regret says, something went wrong, let me figure out what happened and adjust. Shame says, something is wrong with me, and I need to hide it. You cannot solve a financial problem you're hiding from yourself. So let's pull all of this together, because there's a practical question underneath all of this. What do people actually do with this understanding? The first thing, and it sounds simple, but it is not easy, is to separate the number from the feeling. Start actively distinguishing between objective financial data and emotional financial experience. They're both real, but they require different responses. The objective data responds to planning, to adjustments, to behavior change. The emotional experience responds to acknowledgement, to understanding its sources, and to the deliberate construction of a more accurate internal narrative. Most financial advice addresses only the first thing, but most financial suffering lives in the second. The second thing is to audit the comparison points. This is concrete and it's possible. Think about where the sense of being behind actually comes from. Is it a specific person or group? A number heard somewhere that seems like a benchmark? A social feed? There's solid psychological evidence that deliberately narrowing the comparison set, focusing on personal progress over time rather than against peers, produces a measurable reduction in financial anxiety. Progress is real, against your own past. That's a comparison that's actually available to you and that you can actually win. Third, and this is something financial content almost never addresses, build structural insulation rather than income growth as the primary strategy. What that means is this: the goal isn't just to earn more. It's to reduce exposure to the financial shocks that generate precarity anxiety in the first place. That looks like building an emergency fund large enough to feel real. Not $1,000, not $2,000, but 3 to 6 months of actual expenses, which for someone living a $100,000 lifestyle might be $15,000 to $20,000. It looks like having health coverage that doesn't feel like a trap. It looks like not having every dollar committed before it arrives. The emotional effect of that kind of structural buffer is disproportionate to its size. People with a meaningful emergency fund don't just have money. They have a different relationship with risk. They feel more free to make decisions because they know one bad month won't collapse everything. Fourth, and this is the psychological piece, work on the floor, not the ceiling. Most financial anxiety is about what happens if things go wrong. The default response to that anxiety is to try to earn more, to push the ceiling higher. But a more effective response, psychologically, is to strengthen the floor, to know clearly, even in a bad scenario, this is what would happen. These are the resources available. This is the path through. When the floor is known and solid, the ceiling becomes less urgent. This is the difference between financial planning as aspiration and financial planning as security engineering. Both have their place, but for people who are dealing with persistent anxiety, the floor matters more. And last, recognize that felt security is built incrementally through repeated evidence. The brain learns to feel safe the same way it learns anything, through repeated experience of safety. Every time there's a financial difficulty and it's navigated without collapse, every time there's something unexpected and the plan holds, every month that the emergency fund stays intact and grows, these experiences accumulate into a different relationship with money. Not by thinking about them once, but by tracking them, acknowledging them, and letting them become part of the financial story instead of being invisible in the background while every anxiety gets full attention. Here's the thing. 6 figures is a real number. It represents real labor, real choices, real trade-offs. It should matter. And it does, but mostly when it's paired with the right structural decisions and the right internal framework. Without those two things, the number is just a new baseline, a new ceiling that immediately becomes a new floor, a new version of the same feeling with different furniture. The goal isn't to feel rich. The goal is to feel stable. Stable enough that a car repair is an inconvenience, not a crisis. Stable enough that a medical bill is a problem to solve, not a reason to panic. Stable enough that the financial background noise gets quiet enough to think. That's a different project than getting a raise. It's a slower project in some ways, but it's the project that actually works. If this resonated with how you think about money or how you've been experiencing it, subscribe. Because this channel is going to keep going deeper into the psychological side of personal finance. Not the numbers-only version. The real version, the one that includes what it actually feels like to navigate money in America right now. Take care of yourself out there.